song blasting out of every radio in 1980, topping charts in 14 countries, turning into the ultimate anti-authority anthem. It wasn't just a hit, it was a cultural phenomenon, a rallying cry for a generation. You know the chant, right? We don't need no education, sung by a choir of kids who sound like they've just busted out of detention, utterly defiant and perfectly pitched. This track, Another Brick in the Wall, wasn't just big. It was a 40 million selling smash, platinum on 3 continents, inescapable. Yet the actual voices on that iconic hook, 23 13-year-olds who never saw a penny for a quarter of a century. Imagine that. Then, against all odds, a stubborn royalties sleuth enters the picture. A law changes, and the grown-up kids finally get to ask, "Where's our money?" Stick around. This is how a spontaneous classroom sing-along became one of rock's biggest injustices, and how a tiny clause in a 1996 statute rewrote the ending, proving that even after decades, justice can sometimes find its way home. It's the autumn term, 1979. Islington Green School, nestled in North London. Suddenly, the quiet routine of lessons is broken when music teacher Alun Renshaw gets an unexpected call, a whisper from the rock and roll gods themselves. Pink Floyd need a children's choir for their ambitious new concept album, The Wall. Renshaw, a man clearly with a bit of rebel spirit himself, keeps it hush-hush from the head teacher. Can you imagine the thrill? He marches 23 unsuspecting kids, aged between 13 and 14, across the road to Britannia Row Studios during lesson time, a secret mission unfolding right under the nose of school authority. They're handed lyrics that talk about dark sarcasm in the classroom and thought control, words that might have raised an eyebrow or two if the head had caught wind. The kids, being kids, giggle at the naughty bits, then belt out the chorus with a raw, unpolished energy in just a couple of takes. Job done. They're back before the lunch bell, buzzing with an unforgettable secret. There were no contracts in sight, absolutely no talk of money, just the sheer, unadulterated thrill of singing on a real record. Weeks later, the single rockets to #1 in the UK, then #1 in the US, and frankly, everywhere else too. The school receives a modest £1,000 and a shiny platinum disc for its troubles. The kids? They get commemorative flexi discs and bragging rights. And honestly, when you're 13, that feels like more than enough. Who needs money when you've got playground glory? Life, as it always does, moves on. The pupils eventually leave school, grow up, and carve out their own paths. They hit their 20s, then their 30s, becoming nurses, cabbies, social workers, IT techs. Just ordinary people living ordinary lives. But there's one extraordinary constant. Another Brick in the Wall, Part 2, never, ever leaves the airwaves. Pubs, stadiums, movie soundtracks blast it constantly, a ubiquitous anthem of rebellion. Every single play, every spin on the radio or TV is supposed to generate a royalty. That's how the music business works, right? Except these session singers, hired without paperwork back in 1979, were basically ghosts in the system. The money pipeline, a complex network of labels, publishers and performance rights organizations, flowed freely to the band, the record label, the publisher. The choir? Completely locked out. One former pupil, now a dinner lady, tells a local paper she hums along in the school canteen, and kids sometimes ask, "Miss, isn't that you?" She just shrugs, a wry smile on her face. She can't exactly invoice anyone. It's a surreal existence, hearing your own voice, your youthful defiance, echo through public spaces, knowing it fuels a multi-million-pound industry. yet you remain utterly uncompensated. The song becomes a rebel flag for millions, yet the very people who gave it that rebellious voice can't even pay a parking ticket with their share of its immense success. And so, 25 years glide past, a quarter century of their voices ringing out, unheard in the financial sense. Then, a subtle shift in the legal landscape. December 1996, the UK transposes an EU directive into what becomes the Copyright and Related Rights Regulations. It's dense, it's full of legalese, but buried deep within its clauses is a game changer. Performers now own a right to equitable remuneration whenever their recorded work is broadcast. What does that actually mean in plain English? It translates to this: if your voice is identifiable on a track, and that track gets played on radio or TV, you can claim a slice of the broadcast royalties. And here's the crucial bit: you can claim it, even if you signed away everything else in some long-forgotten contract, which these kids didn't even have. There's a catch, of course. The rule isn't retroactive to sales, nor does it cover airplay before 1997. Still, it's a foot in the door, a glimmer of hope for anyone who slipped through the cracks pre-1996. Word of this new legislation spreads slowly, quietly, through musicians' unions, like a ripple in a vast ocean. Enter Peter Rowan. It's 2004, and Rowan, a softly spoken but tenacious royalties investigator, makes a living sniffing out unpaid performance cash. He's meticulously combing through PAMRA, Performing Artists Media Rights Association, logs, a sea of data. He spots repeated plays of Another Brick in the Wall, cross-references the performers list, and finds it blank. A bell rings in his head. How could the voices on one of the biggest hits ever be uncredited? He tracks down Alan Renshaw, the very teacher who led the choir, now teaching in Australia, who, remarkably, still has a dusty class register from 1979. With that golden list in hand, Rowan embarks on a painstaking mission. He cold calls ex-pupils, explains this obscure new law, and slowly, carefully, forms a loose committee of the 23rd. It's a monumental task, reconnecting people whose paths diverged decades ago, all united by a song they sang as children. Paperwork is filed, and a new chapter begins. The industry reaction. Well, let's just say there were a lot of sympathetic smiles and pats on the back, but not much genuine expectation of a significant payout. The common line, often delivered with a dismissive wave of the hand, was, "Kids from a school choir, they'll get peanuts." It was an easy way to brush off what seemed like a minor claim. But Rowan, ever the advocate, countered sharply, "Peanuts are still peanuts they're owed." He argued forcefully that the choir was unmistakably featured. These weren't just anonymous background singers. These were named minors in a distinct union of voices, their contribution integral and identifiable, not some faceless crowd. The newly created PPL, Phonographic Performance Limited, the organization responsible for collecting UK broadcast fees, became the target of Rowan's group claim, citing that crucial equitable remuneration right under the 96 regulations. The negotiations dragged on for months, a slow grind against established norms and industry skepticism. Pink Floyd's management, though aware, stayed politely on the sidelines. After all, they don't hold the performers' share of broadcast royalties. The school, now an academy trust, couldn't stake a claim either, because the law specifically recognizes individual performers, not institutions. It was a battle for individual recognition. Finally, in 2005, after much deliberation and legal wrangling, PPL approved back payments for airplay stretching from 1997 to that date. Each singer was officially credited on the database as Islington Green School Choir, uncredited vocal. It felt less like a grand victory and more like a typo being corrected 26 years late, a bureaucratic acknowledgement of a long-ignored truth. But it was official, and for the first time, their voices were not just heard, but accounted for. So, what was the grand payday for a quarter-century of uncredited vocal brilliance? Around £130 per person for 8 years of radio spins. Future statements trickled in at maybe £12 a year, coffee and cake money, as some wryly called it. Not remotely life-changing. Certainly not the rock star riches one might imagine for a #1 hit. Yet, when those first envelopes landed on doorsteps, something profound happened. There were tears, group WhatsApp voice notes buzzing with excitement, and an impromptu pub reunion in Angel, North London, where old friends reconnected over a shared, improbable history. One woman used her cheque for a weekend in Barcelona, a little escape she couldn't quite justify before. Another topped up her daughter's university textbook fund, a small but meaningful contribution to a new generation's education. They toasted Renshaw via Zoom, their old teacher in Australia, who joked that the £1,000 the school took all those years ago looked mighty small now. Newspapers ran heartwarming "Pink Floyd kids finally paid" headlines, and music magazines hailed it as a moral victory. Because really, for these individuals, it wasn't about the sum, it was about acknowledgement. The charts had logged a hit, history had logged a choir, and finally, after decades, the accounting logs matched the reality. Their contribution, once invisible, was now undeniably, officially, recorded. Fast forward to today, streaming platforms often list feat. Islington Green School Choir on deluxe remasters of The Wall. Royalties investigators cite the case in lectures, a cautionary tale and a beacon of hope. Musicians now routinely demand performer IDs and clear contractual terms before even stepping into a studio. Labels might grumble about the extra paperwork and the perceived hassle, but the principle is set, solidified by stories like this. If you can be heard, you can and should be paid. However, the fight isn't over. The same loopholes or new ones persist elsewhere. We still have ghost singers, ghost players, and now, with advancing technology, the unsettling prospect of AI stand-ins whose contributions might go uncredited and uncompensated. The Islington Kids win reminds artists, both established and emerging, to read the fine print, to lobby tirelessly for retroactive fixes to existing injustices, and to keep tabs on every legal tweak and technological shift. Were the sums small? Absolutely. But justice scaled to size, especially when it's been denied for so long, still tastes incredibly sweet. It's a testament to the idea that even the smallest voices, when united and persistent, can make the biggest institutions listen. If stories like this make you rethink the songs you grew up with, the hidden histories behind the anthems of our lives, then you absolutely need to hit that subscribe button. I've got a queue of hidden voices and untold tales waiting for their curtain call, and YouTube's algorithm only shows you the next one if it sees that subscribe button lit. And hey, drop a comment. Any other tracks you've always wondered, who actually sang that? Maybe we'll dig into its secrets next. So the next time you hear that rebellious chant, that iconic call for freedom from oppression, remember this. Behind the stadium-filling wall of sound are 23 kids who once whispered in assembly, who secretly giggled at forbidden lyrics. They gave Pink Floyd its biggest hit, carried the anthem of a generation, and for decades walked away with nothing but playground glory and the memory of a thrilling afternoon. 25 years, one quiet statute change, and one stubborn investigator later, they finally opened an envelope containing the world's smallest apology, and undeniable proof that even late, even against massive odds, the system can budge. This wasn't about rock and roll excess or chasing fame, it was about everyday fairness finally cashed in. And that, more than the money, is what they'd been singing for all along.